you never knew what was going to happen next. There would be confetti cannons going off, and you had to shield your records from falling confetti. You just never knew what was going to happen. It was.
Welcome to another episode of the Gay Barchives Show, where we explore gay history, one bar at a time. I'm your host, Art Smith, and our guest today is the legendary club DJ, Robbie Leslie. Welcome to the show, Robbie.
Well, thank you, Art. It's great to be here, and I thank you very much for inviting me.
It is great to have you here. There are so many clubs out there that I'm trying to, get the story on and hear about. And it's hard to track down a lot of people, especially when you're going back 40 or 50 years. A lot of those people aren't around anymore.
Yes,
but your unique perspective is that most of the bars, all of the bars that we're going to talk about today, you were actually on the inside. You were actually working at these clubs. You weren't a casual visitor that dropped in once. You were part of what made that bar what it is known for.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's a great way to describe it. And I feel blessed to have been in the right place in the right time and to have met the right people that have given me access to these amazing clubs. And I'm grateful for my talent that I've developed over the years that has permitted me to get jobs at these amazing clubs.
And there are thousands and thousands of people all over who are grateful for your talents. I have heard so many of them talk about, oh my God, we're going to go hear Robbie Leslie. So
thank you. Thank you very much. I'll tell you a little short story. I was playing at the Stonewall as a guest DJ, and we all know the Stonewall is one of the preeminent pieces of the gay liberation movement, and they had a dance club on the second floor. I happened to go to the men's room while I was waiting to start my set, and I overheard somebody waiting in line for the men's room, and they said, and of course they didn't know me, they didn't know who I was behind them, and they said, "Oh my God, Robbie Leslie I was playing is about to go on," and they were just so thrilled. I was tickled. Only because of just their sincerity and their enthusiasm. Because when you're locked up in the DJ booth, you don't get a lot of feedback except by virtue of a full floor or an empty floor. So this was just a sweet little unsolicited thing that I eavesdropped on, and I never forgot it because it was just so sweet and pure.
Yeah, in New York of all places. Everybody has an image of New York being like a bunch of rude people.
Yeah, to impress a New Yorker is a good job.
And New York certainly was known for having a huge impact on the club scene, especially in the disco era. There were so many places there that even some of them lasted a couple of years, but yet they're iconic, and people who were never there talk about them. But you got your start in this kind of exotic locale that's off the coast of Long Island, this little mysterious place that's called Fire Island.
Yes.
How did that come about? How did you end up working on Fire Island?
That's an interesting story. And you're right, the name Fire Island does conjure up a very exotic and very, very mysterious place. But I was waiting tables in Florida, and I waited on a couple, an elderly couple, and they turned out to be the parents of the owner of the Sandpiper. That was a restaurant and discotheque on Fire Island. This couple was so, I guess, taken with my skills as a waiter. They were so impressed with my waiting, prowess, and they told their son. He poked his head in to the restaurant and looked at me. And then later that night, he ran into me at the Marlin Beach Hotel, which is a club I later started working at here in Fort Lauderdale. And he came up to me, and I thought, because he's an older gentleman, I thought, oh, this is definitely just a pickup. And so he starts talking to me that, I own a club and a restaurant on Fire Island, and I would like to offer you a summer job. And if you're interested, think about it. We must have talked for at least an hour at the bar. And he said, here's my address, this is for internet, of course. And he said, write to me if you're interested. And this is the date you need to be here, to be on the island by. So I thought about it. I had no idea what Fire Island was, but I was excited. And I wrote him and accepted his offer. And then I went up to Fire Island in 1975, late spring, probably the beginning of May. And I moved into a dormitory room above the restaurant and was a waiter there my first year at the Sandpiper. And it wasn't until the second, 2 years later in 1977 that I started DJing. I loved disco music. I loved club life, and I would go out like at least 5 nights a week when I was waiting tables. I just wanted to be in that environment. I just loved the energy and the excitement, of course. And being a gay man, I loved being in the company of gay guys that were having a good time and dancing and whatnot. So working there as a waiter first, and then I was promoted to bartender. And then in 1977, I said, "Can I try my hand at DJing?" And they normally had the best DJs from New York City that would come out for the weekends, and then they'd play tapes during the week. And so they said, "Yeah, sure, you can play after Labor Day, as long as you don't drive all the customers out. We'll give you a try." And that was my first time in a DJ booth, actually playing records, and it was instantly addictive. I loved it. I took to it very quickly. I would practice during the day at this restaurant slash nightclub because I lived right upstairs in the dormitory. So I had full access to the equipment, and I got plenty of time to practice, and that's how I got my start.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yes, I mean, talk about just a very lucky the way all the pieces fell into place.
Yeah, and that's nearly 5 decades ago. I mean, we're talking about a rich history of working in the club scene. Now, back then, for the younger people who don't seem to understand that, to be a DJ did not mean that you had, a laptop with some kind of digital app on it and you sat there and pre-recorded crap and then pushed play and it happened. This was, I mean, if you were a serious DJ and you were working at a big club, you were carting in hundreds of 12-inch singles or whatever, all kinds of vinyl records and other equipment to get the whole thing going. That was quite an adventure. It was quite different than it is today.
It was, yes, it's totally different. I mean, nowadays, in fact, I have right here, these are three little thumb drives that it's all I need to take to a gig. And instead of hundreds of records that I would carry in big canvas bags, and of course, it's one thing to carry them into the club, but to carry them out at 4 or 5 in the morning is even harder. But yes, the technology has completely changed. We were strictly vinyl, and occasionally reel-to-reel tape of some special edit that you may have access to. So yes, it was a much different media that we were playing with, but it was very organic. If you had the talent and if you knew your material really well, it was a very hands-on experience, and that I loved doing it back then. It's of course we changed from vinyl to compact disc, and then from compact disc to digital, digital hard drives and controllers. So yes, there have been changes over 50 years, indeed.
Now, when you started on Fire Island, most people think when they think of DJs that, especially DJs that have a solid career of spinning at different clubs, you always think of them working, midnight to 5 a.m. or something. It's always a late night gig. But there was something unique about Fire Island when you were there. But even though you started in the mid 70s, there had already been 10 years almost of history of an afternoon disco project, which at the time and still is called a tea dance. The Blue
Yes,
Whale in 1966, I believe it was,
that's right.
launched the first tea dance, and you were right in the middle of that. As a DJ 10 years later, what were your thoughts about that to say, hey, it's broad daylight, sunny and hot. I'm supposed to be out here spinning music for a bunch of people in swimsuits?
Right. It was going full, it was an established part of the daily routine. My first year out there. So I took to it quite quickly. And also down here in South Florida, where I lived previously and where I live now as well. There were places that also had tea dance. The Marlin Beach that I mentioned earlier had a very big tea dance on Sundays, but they had also tea in the afternoons, Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday. And so when I went to Fire Island, tea was like as important or as much fun as the nighttime dancing, and it was just a routine that everybody did. Everyone came to tea in the afternoons. Usually the music started around 4, but people would get there about 6, and it would last to about 7:30 or 8. And it was just a wonderful tradition, and it has spread, and it goes on in Palm Springs and well, everywhere, really. I can't, the list goes on and on. But yeah, tea dance is a thing, but it started at the Botel. That was the very first place that had gay dancing to recorded music right there.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And I lived in the South in the late 70s into the 80s, and of course, I live in Florida today as well.
Mhm.
So I'm familiar with a lot of tea dances since then. But before I moved south,
Yeah,
that was an unknown concept. I mean, up north, you never thought about, oh, we're going to have a party on Sunday afternoon outside a gay club and we're going to dance on the patio. It was like, you
right.
got to be kidding me.
That's
Uh,
right. Yes. It did have a couple locations where it was done, like Provincetown and New Hope, at least in the 70s. Certainly, I mean, Fire Island started in the 60s, but and it's a funny story. Well, maybe not so funny. Their police would come and you could not dance. Two men couldn't dance together back then, so they had to have groups on the floor with at least one woman. So it was very kind of sketchy back then to I mean, gay liberation was still just cracking open the door, so to speak. And so they always had to have a woman in there on the floor, otherwise you were breaking the law. And it wasn't until like I would say the mid 70s when that all went away and guys could dance, without being afraid of being arrested and carted off the island.
Now, the Sandpiper um, in Fire Island Pines
Mhm.
is now labeled and known as the Pavilion, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, the Sandpiper opened in, I think, 1965 or 1966 as a restaurant, and then they started getting into. They had a jukebox, of course, but in the I'd say about maybe 73 or so, they started playing tapes for dancing, and the nightlife. Disco was just getting on its feet. Didn't even really have a name, disco, back then. So it was just getting started. People would come out and they would dance, but there wasn't a live DJ till about 74 or 75, and that's when I started working out there. And as I mentioned earlier, we had all the top DJs from New York City, and they would be like Tom Savarese, Alan Dodd, Richie Rivera, Howard Merritt, Roy Thode, who worked in the Grove. But these are like New York's best, top 10 DJs. And I got to listen to them every night when I was working, when I was either bartending or waiting tables. And so I got to hear the most talent. I think that laid a foundation for me to learn, to learn by listening, and then apply that knowledge for my own DJ sets.
Now, are you surprised? Because I know a lot of the bars that you've worked in, particularly in New York, a lot of the iconic bars that you worked in are no longer around. And like I said, some of them only lasted a few years, but they put their mark on gay history. But
Yeah,
on Fire Island, a couple of the bars that we've talked about, the Pavilion and the Blue Whale, both still exist.
correct. And the Ice
And
Palace,
the Ice Palace
yeah,
still
Cherry
exists.
Grove.
So
Yeah.
is that kind of surprising to you to think about, to when you go back there to think, oh yeah, 40 or 50 years ago, I was right here in this spot and here I am again. And it's still a gay bar and wow.
Yes, it does sort of give one pause to think that these places have been there all this time, and other resorts do have, particularly Provincetown has had clubs that lasted forever. The Atlantic House and the Boat Slip are two that come to mind. Um, but in resorts, I guess there's less turnover. Of course, in New York, real estate is such a premium. Clubs come and go. And back in the 70s and 80s, when new clubs would open, we took it all very much in stride because there was such a turnover. There'd be a club that would open, and then last a couple of years, and it would not be the in spot anymore, and something else would take its place somewhere. And so these places would either close down and the building would be repurposed, or sometimes another club may take over the space. So yeah, in New York City, it's an exceptional place in all ways, and that includes nightlife. There was always a turnover. Every club, it seemed, got better than the club it was replacing. There was always something new on the horizon, and they seemed to just be getting bigger and better. And the technology was improving, so we got kind of used to that. Until the HIV crisis, and of course that started changing the landscape in New York City. Nightlife changed dramatically. And clubs started to downsize for many, many different reasons. Among them, just the price of real estate and the gentrification of Manhattan. Most clubs now are in Brooklyn because of available space.
Yeah, the scene in New York City has changed quite a bit over the last
Yes,
decades. Now
absolutely.
you had mentioned Ice Palace, you'd mentioned Sandpiper on Fire Island,
Mhm.
and there's one more club there I want to mention. I don't think you ever worked there, but it does have a Fort Lauderdale connection, and it was there very briefly in the time frame that you were still there.
Yeah,
What impact did it have on the Fire Island scene when the Copa opened on Fire Island?
right. Well, the Copa was which fast forward, I actually worked for John and Bill at the Copa in Fort Lauderdale, but that's later in the story. But when Copa opened in Cherry Grove, it made a big splash. I don't know if they were financially successful, but the technology, the sound, the lights, they had Carmen D'Alessio sending out invitations for the opening party, and she's the one that used to do the mailing list for Studio 54. So I mean, they had tapped all the right people, and they had the best of the best there. The great DJs working. Uh, However, there were, like in a resort town, sometimes if you're the new guy in town, there is either a little bit of confusion or resentment. It's like, you're the new guy, so you have to earn your stripes before you get a loyal following. So I think people would go there, and they were rather crowded on the weekends, but I don't know if they sustained enough customer loyalty to keep them going. And then I think it was early season, uh, around 1982, maybe. I'm not sure about the years, when there was a fire and the place burned down. And they chose not to rebuild.
Yeah, I interviewed John Castelli about that. Of
Oh,
course,
you did?
Bill has passed away, but I
Yes.
interviewed John Castelli about it a while back, and his telling of the story is they had one really good season there. In the beginning of the next season, the place burned,
Right.
and
Right.
that they had, for some reason or another, they were planning on an expansion. They were planning on expanding it even more,
Mhm.
making it bigger and better. And that at the time of the fire, he and Bill had to get back into the building and open up the floor safe that was under the dance floor. And there were, tens of thousands of dollars in cash stuffed in the floor that was safe from the fire because it was in a, in a floor safe. But to hear him tell it, there was plenty of money flowing in, and they didn't know what to do with it all.
Right. Wow.
But they did not reopen, and they then returned to their roots in Florida and opened one in Key West and had the one in Fort Lauderdale as well.
What they did in nightlife was just amazing. They had an incredibly creative style. They spared no expense. As I said before, I worked for John and Bill at the Copa Fort Lauderdale starting in 1987. That's after I left New York City and moved back to Florida. And I loved working for them. And then they would send me down once a month to do the Copa Key West, which was another great place. It was also in a converted theater like Studio 54 was. So it was a great space with wonderful acoustics and a great staff. Key West was just a magical town back then. A great place to work, very memorable. Unfortunately, that place burned as well. It was a fire next door that spread into the Copa, and the building was like an old movie theater, so it was all wood, so the place just went up in minutes.
Yeah, I interviewed Scott Childs as well, and and he talks about that because he's, I think, the only employee that worked there from the day that the Key West location opened until the day it burned. He was there at that night. And there was a bakery, I think, next door, or a cookie shop or something to do with baking that went up in flames.
Right.
And while we're briefly on the topic of Copa, the third location was also destroyed by a natural disaster. It was a hurricane that destroyed it. So John and Bill did not, well, they didn't own it at that time, but
correct. I worked for the subsequent owners as well that bought it from John and Bill. And but John and Bill, they had magic fingers, and they just when they ran the club, it was just a destination. Fort Lauderdale was not the gay vacation spot quite that it was until the Copa opened, because that was a huge draw. There was the Marlin Beach, which John, as you probably remember from his interview, John started that as a gay event, the dancing and everything. So he's had his hands in nightlife forever, and I have such respect for him. I mean, he's just an incredibly creative and imaginative promoter, producer, owner. Yeah, wonderful to work with.
Yeah, and I remember after the interview, he lives right there in Fort Lauderdale with you as well.
Yes, yes, he does. Yeah, I saw him a couple of months ago. Yeah.
And when we first released the interview, I brought a thumb drive by the office with the interview on it in case he, wanted to have it there.
Nice.
And his staff at the next staff meeting applauded him because they did not know, since this was 40 years ago, they did not know that he was the guy behind the Fort Lauderdale nightlife scene. And they stood up and applauded him and said, "Oh my God, thank you so much. We didn't know you were so important."
Oh yeah, he really made Fort Lauderdale a gay destination. He truly did. I'd say he gets more credit than any single person. I mean, he gets the prize. Yeah.
So after your experience in Fire Island, you're living in New York City, and you worked at probably what I would say are three of the most memorable facilities that ever existed in the nightlife scene in New York City. I mean, I'm not sure there are many others that even come close. The one that, of course, everybody will want to hear about is also one of the shortest lived nightclubs on the planet, I think. It was like not even 3 years. I think it was 33 months that the original Studio 54 was actually open. Now, I don't know, were you there from the very beginning?
No, I was not. When I moved into New York, it was 1979. Excuse me. And I didn't actually work for Steve and Ian formally. until around the end of 79, the beginning of 80. And I remember Steve. I never saw Ian in the club because he was kind of the back guy. He would come during the day and whatnot. But Steve would come in sometimes when I was working with his entourage, and by that I mean like Liza Minnelli and Halston and all Andy Warhol and Truman. It was like when he was in the club, it just transformed. Now this was after I believe the raid by or right at about the same time. I think it was right after, and it was an amazing gig. I did not fully realize the importance of it at the time I was working there because it was a very difficult job. They would have celebrities in and out of a DJ booth all night long. It was very distracting, and it was a small booth. It was just, you never knew what was going to happen next. There would be confetti cannons going off, and you had to shield your records from falling confetti. You just never knew what was going to happen. It was fun, but it was very, very challenging. And yet, that's the club, and that's the space that has opened more doors for me professionally than any other venue I've ever worked in. And it's I now work for Studio 54 Radio and another Sirius XM channel called the Kiki Lounge. So that has facilitated, another residency, but now on satellite radio.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because in our history of gay bars, there are a couple of bars that have made a lasting impression and have not been around very long, and people don't even realize it. One of them is Studio 54, which, as I mentioned, was open less than 3 years in
Yep,
its original incarnation. And the
correct.
other one, which you also mentioned,
Mhm.
is the Stonewall, which also was open less than 3 years in its original incarnation.
Yes.
Everybody, I did a survey today in my Facebook group.
Uh-huh.
Over 15,000 members asked about the oldest gay bar they ever went to,
Uh-huh.
that's still in business, and that can't tell you how many people said Stonewall.
Is
I'm
that
like, no,
right?
there was a 20-year gap. They were closed from
Right.
1970 to 1990.
Wow. My gosh, I didn't realize that. That's incredible. But a lot of your membership, they had been there prior to the first closing.
Some of them, it
Yeah.
depends.
Yeah.
Obviously, to have been in a gay
Uh,
bar in before
Right.
1969, you'd have
Sure.
to be in your mid 70s by now.
That's true.
Um,
That's true.
so
Keep
legally,
forgetting.
anyway.
Yes.
I have interviewed a few people who were there originally, but for the most part, it's people who remember it from the 90s
From the 90s.
and
Sure. Yeah.
talk about it from that perspective.
Right.
Um,
Right. How
yeah,
exciting.
Studio 54. Everybody talks about it. Everybody remembers it. They're still selling Studio 54 merchandise online.
They are.
Um, I think is it owned by MGM now, or did they
MGM
give that
owns
up?
they own the logo. They
Okay.
own the artwork. I don't know. It's such an abstraction now. You really can't say who owns what. But
Yeah.
as far as the 5-4 in that particular script, they do hold that. It's very ambiguous. I mean, I see the Studio 54 logo or cipher used in promotions all over the planet, and a lot of times I'm one of the headliners. So I don't think it's an enforced copyright.
Yeah.
Let me put it to you that way. I think it's a little lax because it is everywhere, and the merchandise. I think the merchandise is all. I don't think they're really getting any kind of percentage off that.
Yeah, I'm sure they're not. I'm sure it's just, but people still want it. People still want it. Now,
Yes, and
what to
people
you?
recognize it. They instantly recognize that cipher and the name Studio 54.
So to you, what was the most memorable part of Studio 54? If somebody asked you,
Mhm.
what was iconic about it? What sticks in your mind?
I would say the energy on the dance floor. I mean, it was, and I've said this many, many times, so now it's almost a cliche, but it felt like New Year's Eve every night that I was working there. It was just such a kinetic energy. such spontaneous connection of people dancing, and uh, it was just a great party. Never a dull moment. Again, like I said before, it was so exciting that it was like almost electrifying. And yes, it was. I was exhausted by the end of the night when I went home, because it was just, you really you were at your wits' end. You're playing your best. You were constantly looking around to see who was there. It was just a wonderful experience all the way around. Yeah.
Well, fortunately, DJs were recognized prominently in any of the promotions for different events at any club, really, because that's a big draw. So, fortunately, you have tons and tons of evidence that you were there. You're not like the guy that says, "Well, I was a bartender at the Saint for 6 months and nobody can prove it." You have, we're actually going to put them up in this video. People will see some of the invitations and stuff. And
Yes.
you have actual documentation. I mean, people know, and people, once they got to know your style,
Mhm.
you became an icon. People started talking about, oh, where's he going to be this week? Where's Robbie spinning next? Where are we going to go? And I've seen people post online about, oh, I've, been going to watch, to listen to Robbie spin for 40 years. Whenever I was around, if I was close enough to go, I would go. So
Yeah.
you made a name for yourself. There's no doubt about that. And
Thank
like
you.
you said, Studio 54 certainly helped that.
Absolutely. Yes, it did. I can say that I was the first DJ that was actually, my image was actually used in invitations to events, which I thought was pretty exciting at the time. I was very thrilled to have my image used as part of advertising. And in New York, DJ talent was very much appreciated. If you go, I hate to say in the provinces, but once you leave the big cities of like Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York City, you'll hear, oh, DJ Jimmy or DJ Joe or DJ, whatever. You didn't even have a last name. But in New York, they took their talent very seriously, and people did follow the DJs. I would be working, let's just say one night I'd be at the Saint, and then a couple nights later I would be working on Fire Island, or I'd be at Underground, which is another club in New York City, or 12 West. So I had a very loyal following that kept track of what clubs I was working at and what nights, and they would actually go out for specific DJs, which now it's the clubs that draw you in. But back then, the DJs had a great pull. I mean, yes, granted, nowadays there are name DJs that we're talking about, like festival DJs that are hugely popular and bring in tons of money, and people do go to see them. But it's not like a club experience. It's more of a show, which you have to make that distinction. It's two completely different. They're both called DJs, but it's a completely different type of
Right.
entertainment. Yeah.
Right. And the difference too is, of course, when you were in New York City, um, the Saint, Studio 54, Palladium, Limelight, all these places were
Yes.
just a drop in the bucket because there were so many clubs. You could
Yes.
literally have 100 DJs spinning the same night
Yeah.
in different gay clubs around the city.
That's true.
So,
That's true.
it's
Yeah.
there aren't very many cities now that have, a proliferation of gay clubs that are open every night.
That's so
Um,
true. Yeah. Yeah.
now,
Nightlife back then was just thriving, and like you said, there could be like 100 different options for you to go out. You could go to a small little club that had tiny little postage stamp dance floor, and you like the DJ that what he was playing, or you could go to these mega clubs that, as you listed, that and we're not only talking Saturday nights, we're talking, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You had so many options. It was staggering.
yeah. Now you also worked at the Saint, and the Saint is another club that is just, since the existence of the Saint New York, I think there have been at least 25 other gay bars that have used the name Saint. I mean, they have been everywhere.
Yeah.
Even in Fort Lauderdale or
Yeah.
Miami or Atlanta or wherever, there have been Saints around the world.
Yes.
But the Saint in New York is a club the likes of which we will probably never see again.
Mhm.
Talk about what it was like when you first walked in that door
Mhm.
and you knew that you were going to be in control of the mood for that night. You were going to be up there spinning and you had all of this majesty at your fingertips. What was that
Right.
like?
Well, the Saint was, as you said, probably the pinnacle of nightlife. And when you think about Studio 54, it's known around the planet. If you mention the Saint, the only people that really know it are guys of an, kind of with a little bit of New York experience or New York background, of a certain age, or people that are connected to that crowd. Either the Fire Island set or just the circuit. And the younger guys, they know of the Saint, or the Saint at large, because it's kind of perpetuated the brand. But I'm not even sure that's still going anymore. I think they did one last year, but it was not. It was just a shadow of its former glory. But the Saint was. I'll give you, to those who don't know much about it. It used to be a big movie palace, and it had been converted and used in the early 70s and late 60s as a rock and roll venue called the Fillmore East. Very famous. I mean, all the big rock bands, the Grateful Dead, Janis Joplin, hundreds of famous groups performed there. It was dark for a few years, and then it was bought in 1979 and remodeled and repurposed as the Saint. It was a huge space. And the thing that was so remarkable about it, I'm getting excited just thinking about it. So I'm getting tongue-tied. Was that it had a planetarium floating in the middle of the space that would have been, say, above the orchestra when it was a theater. So it was about halfway to the ceiling. There was a planetarium which had a dance floor under it, and it was enormous. It was about 40 feet high, the planetarium dome, and very, very wide, but it was a circular dance floor. The whole building had been converted. The lower level was a lounge. The middle section, as I said, was the planetarium, and there was an upper section which was a balcony, which was for viewing, and it was sort of did double duty as a back room, but that wasn't really the way it was designed. Anyways, as a DJ, that was like playing Carnegie Hall. And I'm proud to say that as far as pull and reputation, I was booked there more than any other DJ, and I pulled more patron. I filled the club more than anyone else. So it's something I'm quite proud of. That was kind of the peak of my career in phase one before I left New York. And I gave my farewell performance there before I moved to Florida in November of November of 1986, and that's when I moved to Florida, and with the intention of retiring as a DJ. But that didn't play out, as you can see. I'm still doing it. But that was the plan. It didn't quite happen the way I wanted it. There was just too much demand, and it was too tempting to get back into the business. And I realized there was nothing else career-wise that I loved as much as I did spinning. So I got back into it, and that's when I started working for the Copa Fort Lauderdale, and then branching into the circuit, which is a whole other type of spinning, and working all over the country.
Now, the Saint, when it first opened,
Mhm.
it was a little bit unusual too. It was a private membership club, right? It
Yes.
wasn't come in and pay $5 at the door. It was you buy a membership for the whole year. And
Mhm.
at the time, it was fairly expensive. I mean, it wasn't something the average waiter would probably pull out of his pocket.
Right. It was not cheap. It was expensive. I mean, we're talking about 1980s dollars, but I think it would range from $100 to $200 a year, and that's a sizable. That's a big chunk of change. But you also had to be interviewed. You couldn't just like pay your money and get your membership card and jump in there. You had to actually come to the club during the day and be interviewed. So it was a very stringent membership policy. They only let a handful of women in because Bruce, who was the owner and the man who dreamed up this club, he wanted strictly a male ambiance or male atmosphere, and the only women that really had access were the women that used to hang out at the other clubs that were, that were thought of as just, part of the gang, so to speak, that were embraced by the gay community. But there was no purses or high heels or any of that stuff allowed at all. It was a place to go dance all night long. It was open. It would be open anywhere from, well, about 8 hours. On party nights, it would go, I think my personal record was 20 hours. That was from, like 11 o'clock at night until the following evening. I can't remember what time, when I finished, something like 5 or 6 o'clock at night, the second night. And that was one DJ. That wasn't those are the days that one DJ played the whole party, not multiple DJs. So people would come and they would dance all night. It was a wonderful experience. It was a membership, so everyone was at least acquainted. It was several thousand people that were members, and it created a real extended family that was sadly picked apart by AIDS and the health crisis that came about in the early 80s and continued through the decade. We lost a great deal of the initial membership for the club in that decade. Yeah, and they had to close in 1988 because the membership was largely decimated, and they just didn't want to open the club up to a wider audience. They wanted to keep it the special place that it was, and that's when they closed the main building and transferred over to the Saint at Large, which was an occasional party they would do several times a year in selected venues.
Now, I also want to mention briefly another club that has its own unique situations from New York City. It is currently a college dorm.
Oh, yes.
But back in the day, it had made its mark in a number of different ways. It was called the Palladium.
Mm-hmm.
And at least part of it near the dance floor had 100-foot high ceilings. Is that right?
That sounds right. Yes. I didn't have my tape measure with me, but it was like a cathedral. It was that big.
Well, the story is that there was a gigantic mural by Keith Haring that was 100 feet tall positioned there, which therefore would mean the ceiling would have to be 100 feet tall.
Yes.
But they also had a room. They also had a room by Basquiat, right?
That's correct. It was called the Michael Todd Room, and that was in the front of the building, kind of over the marquee that was out on 14th Street. And yes, that sort of served as a VIP room, although it wasn't really segregated, but it was a chill room to get away from like the loud music. And they had their own DJ up there. Anita Sarko was the resident DJ upstairs, and she played a more eclectic, kind of more punky, but off the wall, musical format. And I was playing like more mainstream and club music down on the main floor.
Now, I posted a few things about the Palladium, and depending on where it's posted and who's responding, I get mixed reviews from people. Some people say it was not a gay bar. Some people say it was a gay bar. Steve Lewis said it was a gay bar. It was intended from the time they took it over to be a gay bar. Other people say, no, it wasn't gay, but gay people went there. What was your perception?
Well, it was conceived and built with the consultation of Steve Rebell and Ian Schrager. So it was designed to be the next step or the next progression from Studio 54. And Studio was not designed also as a gay club. It was a mixed club.
Right.
That did have some nights that were more gay, although it was never exclusively gay on any given night. But at Palladium, yeah, you could, depending on what nights you try to go there. I mean, it would be maybe 80-90% gay on Thursdays and Sundays, and if you went on a Friday or Saturday, it might be like 25-30% gay. So there was no strict gay straight definition. It was very much like Studio 50.
But they were always welcome.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. But there were gay night. There were more gay nights, and they traditionally were, as they were at studio, Thursdays and Sundays, and those were largely the nights that I was hired to play, and they were packed. They were packed, and again, mostly guys, probably, as I said, 80-90% gay men, and great fun. It was a beautiful space. Again, it was a theater. It had been, completely redesigned by a Japanese architect that I don't remember his name, but it was just a stunning, stunning space. And it was I played there from opening until I left New York in '86, and it was great. It was a great club, beautiful, beautiful place. Yeah, an amazing sound system too.
Yeah, and a gigantic wall of video monitors
Oh yes, yes, two of them actually. I don't even know how
flanking
big
the
they
dance
were.
floor, right?
Sorry?
Were they flanking the dance floor, one on each side?
No, they were on arms that were motorized, and they floated over the dance floor, and they could be level. In other words, the screens would be like I'm facing the camera. These would be the screens. It was about I'd say 18 monitors that were all in one big panel, and these monitors could play copies of one image, or they could merge, and so you could make one large image from these 18 monitors. It was, for its day, it was incredible. But this panel, it was on an armature that would hold it, and it would level up, and it would turn this thing, and so it could be level over your head, and you could be watching these videos right over your head, or it could be angled at you, or it could be at the front of the room, and so yes, it was remarkable.
Yeah, and I just wanted to include that in there because to me,
Yeah,
that's an important part of not only of your history, but of gay club history in general, is the extravagance and extreme levels they went to in New York in those days, and that later, of course, carried on to other clubs around the country, which kind of mimicked that in the later part of the disco era into the 80s and 90s, where you
yeah,
started seeing clubs that were really investing in special effects, in lighting, in sound systems, which really kind of jacked up the need for quality DJs as well. Because if you're going to
sure.
spend $500,000 on sound system, you don't want the local, grocery kid coming in there on Saturday night and spinning for your club. So
Right, right, of course. I mean, these big rooms, there was a special style or class of DJ that was trained to play the bigger rooms, and most of them have retired or are no longer with us. But a friend of mine, Bob Miro, who used to work in San Francisco, and then he played at Backstreet here in Fort Lauderdale. There's a handful of them still out there, but it takes a certain talent to play to a room that big and with that much power. You really have to have your shit together, if you'll excuse the expression, to know how to handle and to pilot a system that powerful and play for a crowd that large. It's a special talent. It's something that it took me literally years to develop, and it was a natural progression from starting at the Sandpiper, which was a couple hundred people, playing till 4 in the morning, then moving into Manhattan and starting to play for 1,000 people until 6 in the morning, and then the Saint opening and 4,000 people until noon and 2 in the afternoon, nonstop. So these large clubs across the country had a certain chemistry that only a handful of DJs could really, really pilot with ability.
So you've spent the last basically 45 years building your resume
Yes,
and working at all these fabulous spaces, getting known around the world for your DJ skills. And just this past summer, a friend of mine, Bobby Bonanno, who
yes,
is the founder of the Fire Island Pines Historical Preservation Society, he tapped you and he said, I want to bring the story of Fire Island and the energy of the Fire Island tea dance to other cities. I want to spread the word and let people experience what that energy is like.
Yes.
And I can't do it myself because I'm not a DJ. So, hey, Robbie, what do you think?
Mhm.
And obviously, you said, sure, let's do it.
I said, I love the idea. Yes. Bobby is an amazing conceptualist, and he has an appreciation for Fire Island. He is this website, the Fire Island Pines Preservation Society, is like so important because it's preserved the culture that largely gets forgotten, after 5 or 10 years. But he has researched and preserved and collected information about the Fire Island culture and everything that entails, from club owners to the people who went out there, to the gay rights and gay liberation movement. Uh, anyways, so he wanted to do this in gay St. Petersburg, and I was totally on board. I love the Fire Island sound, and I love the concept of recreating it for a different audience in a new venue. The bar cocktail, it's more of a bar. It's more of a club space than just a bar, but it's a fantastic venue. Was the perfect location to pick to do it, and it was wonderful. It was a great success. It was around the wet area, which has a pool and a lounge, like lots of lounge area, but they cleared it off and had a dance floor and palm trees, and it was beautiful and a great success. It was a lot of fun.
It really was. I was there all 3 days.
Oh, great.
I was there for the art exhibit, the photography exhibit by Merrill Meisler, which
Yes.
was another amazing aspect of that.
Mhm.
And I know, with you being the perfectionist that you are and paying attention to every detail of what you're spinning and what's around you, and Bobby paying attention to all the details of planning the event, and David Fisher paying attention to the presentation, because
Yes.
he went out. I mean, he could have easily just said, okay, do it by the pool, but no, it had to have the Saturday Night Fever dance floor out there
Right.
reconstructed. It had to have all kinds of stuff going on to build the ambiance and the feel. And when I was there, what really amazed me the most is people kept coming up to me and they kept saying, oh my God, Robbie Leslie is spinning here. That's Robbie Leslie up there.
Wow. That's
That was
fantastic.
just, it was like an amazing thing for them to see your name on the bill, to know that you were going to be there, to get an authentic taste of Fire Island tea dance
Right.
brought right to their little city of St. Pete, and it was packed the whole weekend. I mean, that pool area was people in the pool, around the pool, in the bar, everywhere.
Yes, yes, it was so much fun, and I'm very honored and I'm touched that people were so excited to have me there, because I was absolutely thrilled to be a part of it. It was just a wonderful event, and David did an incredible job. I mean, you can tell this guy is, he's just an amazing. He's got an amazing mind for producing. And Bobby's concept, they fleshed it out beautifully. It was just wonderful. Yeah.
So a couple of weeks ago, I did another in-depth interview with David Fisher,
Hmm.
and we talked about his transition from fast food administration or restaurant administration into the club scene and the business that he's in now. But one of the things we definitely talked about is something that's coming up at
Yeah.
the end of December. On New Year's Eve this year, every bar tries to do something on New Year's Eve. A lot of times it's just a theme. They pick the name of a movie that has to do with New Year's, and they say, "Oh, we're going to have a Greta Garbo New Year's Eve or something." But again,
Mhm.
Bobby goes
Yes.
to David and said, "We had such a blast with the Fire Island tea dance. Let's try to do something like that again." And just a couple of days ago, they announced that they are doing the glitziest, flashiest, most extravagant Relive Studio 54 New Year's Eve theme. And I don't know if you can leak this secret or if you know who it is. Do you know who they got for the DJ for that night?
I've heard rumors, but I'm not sure. It might be me. I'm not positive, but
It absolutely is. They're bringing Robbie Leslie down to St. Pete again for the second time in 1 year.
That's right. Yeah. So thrilled to be coming back.
Well, in your case, up to St. Pete because you live in Fort Lauderdale.
Over. You could say over. Yes.
Yes, up and over.
Up and over. Yes.
So again, they're going over the top. I guarantee there will be things seen at that event that will probably put tears in your eyes. You'll say, oh my God, I remember that from when I was working at Studio 54. They had the same kind of feel. They did the same kind of effects. They had, the same kind of energy. So I have a feeling you're in for a little bit of a shock too. But I am looking forward to that. I cannot wait until New Year's Eve.
Thank you.
And to see yet another Robbie Leslie experience in St. Pete, which is just 20 minutes from me.
Thank you so much. I'm absolutely over the moon about this, and I know the team that's putting it together. It's going to be incredible. I guarantee it. It's going to be so much fun. It's going to be a great place to ring in the new year. Definitely. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to it. And I thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about some of your club history and fill us in on these iconic places. So thank you, Robbie.
Thank you, Art, very much. Next time you have about 8 or 10 hours, we'll go and do a deep dive, and I'll tell you all the naughty stories about the clubs as well.
All right.
Very good. It's a day.